Hey there, sales players. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing new sponsor, Lemlist. Whether you're closing deals or nurturing leads, Lemlist is your all-in-one platform for personalization outreach that converts. Picture this. You craft a killer email campaign in minutes using Lemlist's intuitive drag-and-drop editor. Want to stand out? Lemlist is here to help with advanced personalization that lets you dynamically insert custom images, videos, and even personalized landing pages based on your persona. With Lemlist Analytics, you'll know exactly who opened, clicked, and replied to your emails. Join thousands of sales professionals who trust Lemlist to supercharge their outreach efforts. Use the link in the show notes below and start your free trial today. Your personalized outreach just got a whole lot easier. Happy selling.
What's going on, sales players? It's Jesse here, and I want to introduce you to a genuinely cool product that we just learned about called Evie AI. It is a LinkedIn AI content assistant that was built to enhance your LinkedIn presence, increase your exposure and productivity as a seller. You can create personas, generate ideas, generate comments, craft posts, and 10x your LinkedIn presence. We actually had Joe, the founder, on the show, and he was kind enough to put together a special offer for sales players. There is a link in the show notes with more details. Go check out Evie AI. That's EVY AI. Welcome to Sales Players, the #1 podcast for top players in B2B sales.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the world of sales, this is the show for you.
We're all about bringing you fresh, actionable ideas to supercharge your rev gen game.
We dive deep into the mindset, habits, and tools used by top performers in the industry. Generate more leads, close more deals, and build wealth and financial security in B2B sales.
So if you're ready to level up, you've come to the right place. Join the conversation with other like-minded sales players and continue the discussion beyond the show.
Hit the subscribe button, tune into the sales players, and let's start winning together. We have our good friend Egan. And how do you pronounce your last name, Egan?
Montgomery.
Okay, so Egan Montgomery, formerly with High Alpha. He is now the co-founder of Backstroke, which is a new AI email tool. Really excited to get into that. And I first met Egan actually randomly through LinkedIn, through High Alpha, through the Indianapolis tech scene. And one of the things that I just want to say thank you to is like actually being able to open your DMs and have conversations, get me in touch with other people. As a recovering entrepreneur turned tech sales worker, it's sometimes a little awkward being in Kentucky and Indiana and what we call flyover tech to like meet cool people and meet people that are working with some pretty amazing brands. So glad to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, guys. Thanks for hosting. Excited about it.
And just give us a little bit of background about what your background of what brings you here today and how you got into tech and how you started your company.
Yeah. Well, why don't I start all the way at the beginning? So I showed up to Indianapolis in 2012 as a freshman at Butler University, which is most known for probably falling short in 2 NCAA championship games, but a basketball school nonetheless. And so one thing that was cool about Butler was in order to graduate, you had to do 2 like real world internships. And when you're like a freshman on campus, it's like, gosh, like that's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Do I really have to do that? I'm just trying to graduate. But in hindsight, that was like the best thing about the school and about the program. And it affected me, especially because my first internship, and I won't name the company. It's a honestly like a phenomenal like multinational company, but it's a corporate monolith. And I spent 4 months over like a summer there, and truly just hated my life. I mean, I just realized that wasn't for me. And because Butler literally forced you to do a second internship, I went like deliberately looking for the complete opposite experience to that. So rather than like 80,000 global employees, I joined a company as a marketing intern that had, I think I was the 6th employee, like full or part-time. It was a marketing tech startup based here in Indy called Demand Jump. And literally from day one, I just felt like I was in the right environment for me. I just loved everything about the the pace and being able to have your hands in so many different buckets at one time, and got lucky kind of with some funding and like the timeline of funding lining up with my graduation. And I took a full-time job there, stuck around for 4.5, 5 years. By the time I left, I was leading the marketing org, had my hands in business development, some sales stuff, revenue operations, brand marketing, inbound, like the whole thing. And that was awesome. At one point in that journey, a group in Indy called High Alpha came knocking at my door. High Alpha is, think of them as like a venture fund, a traditional VC, and a startup studio smashed together into one entity. So what we would do is come up with ideas for businesses, validate or vet those ideas, and the ones that we felt like had legs, we would bring in a founder to run the company, and we would inject capital into that business to help them go faster. And then people like me served as effectively like consultants who would operate within the business alongside the new founders to help them get going, faster and not make the same mistakes that are common. So I was at High Alpha for 5 years, and in that time I launched something like 40 B2B SaaS companies. So just like really cool, kind of broad experience across many different markets, working with different types of founders, selling to different types of buyers, and had like a lot of fun along the way. But I knew from even my first day at Demand Jump that I wanted to be a founder at some point in my career. And a lot of the steps I took along that way were preparing myself as best as possible. I mean, nobody's actually prepared to be a founder. I think that's probably true, but how can I put myself in the best position possible to be successful? And so seeing that journey at Demand Jump for 5 years and then getting the breadth of experience that I got at High Alpha just helped my brain develop patterns, kind of see things multiple times. Problems were starting to feel very familiar to me by the time I left High Alpha, and had a really unbelievable opportunity to launch Backstroke, which is a generative email tool for mostly B2C, like e-commerce companies, and start that with a really amazing set of co-founders and early executive team. And so that's where we're at.
And can you just talk, like before your question, Jesse, how did Butler, how did they give you in front of these different companies? Did you have to like actively go seek these, or did these companies like come to the college? Like, talk to us about that young Egan. Like, how did you find these deals,
Yeah, well, so the larger companies in the region, especially in Indianapolis, had massive presences on campus because Butler is still a huge like recruiting pipeline for them. So they would send reps to campus and host lunches and informational sessions. And I mean, everybody knew. And in Indy, it's like the Lillys, the Roches, the Rolls Royces, the Salesforces, like they're all over the place on campus. But what's interesting is that the startup jobs are harder to find because we as startups don't have, endless resources to send people to campuses and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, we do that a little bit and we should be doing that more, frankly. But so the first internship was super easy to find. But when I made the decision to go deliberately find a smaller, faster growing, like more exciting company, I had to work to find that. Fortunately, I had a close friend on campus who was the first non-founder hire at Demand Jump, and he connected me ultimately with the team. But it's so funny because, I was telling Jesse before the show, I showed up in Indianapolis in 2012, and a lot of people will be familiar with ExactTarget, one of the like OG email marketing automation systems, ultimately acquired by Salesforce for almost $3 billion. And the windfall of ExactTarget in Indianapolis is real. Like a lot of the tech and energy and excitement was, you can tie it back to ET and ultimately the acquisition. So, but what's interesting is as a freshman at Butler in 2012, I had no like purview into that at all. I didn't know there was like a flourishing technology scene, a flourishing startup scene. And so in a lot of ways, I got lucky kind of stumbling into that simply because a friend had been connected to that company.
I think that just pointing out, just basically being able to utilize your network. And I think that a lot of people sleep on colleges being a great gateway to getting into tech, because there is like funding resources within R&D of these actual colleges that these companies get. So there is a benefit. So if somebody's looking for a job or looking to get in, like connect to your local state college. Even, there Butler, there's IU, there's like UK down here in Kentucky, Lexington. It's a great way to get in there.
For sure.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in too and say the exact target ripple was so big that I even at one point was working for a former exact target founder who had founded another company. So kind of crazy. And I've never lived in Indy, spent a good amount of time there as part of this role. But even living in Austin, Texas, I was impacted by it. So it goes to show you like what can happen when a really big and successful company hits it big in a metro area like Indianapolis, or really anywhere. There's a handful of examples like this. It really opens up a bunch of opportunities. But the question I had for you, Egan, was...
It does.
Go ahead if you have a thought to add on that. But I've got another question on just the marketplace and kind of the high alpha ecosystem too.
Let me chime in and then we can go there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the post, large acquisition environment, like it creates like the perfect little system for more entrepreneurship, for more investment, more entrepreneurs, because you have a bunch of, you've got all this excitement, and a lot of young or kind of hungry people have just seen what kind of the ideal outcome can look like. So they're motivated and inspired to do it. There's investors and early employees and people who just made a bunch of money so they can write checks, or they have financial security of their own so they can take on that risk of starting a business, or they can take on more risk of starting a business. And you kind of wrap all those things together, and it's just like the perfect little storm to create a bunch more software companies, high growth companies, things like that.
Awesome. And so I know the high alpha company, if you will, I guess the firm came out of Exact Target also. How did you get plugged into that? Because that sounds like the best possible job experience to launch a career in entrepreneurship is to go and be part of, did you say it was 40 different investments in the fund, or is it, yeah. So that's like a boot camp. I'm imagining, first of all, like what was your role there? Who plugged you into that opportunity? Like talk to us about that, because I think that's a lot of people's dream job. Even salespeople out there who just want to get amazing at business. That's a really cool opportunity. I want to hear all about that, and then just, what was the day-to-day like a little bit more?
Yeah, you're right. It was the perfect job. Some people have asked me like if I would go back to school and get my MBA, and I'm like, I got my MBA like times 10 at High Alpha. So it's not necessary. But I got connected. Chase was talking about networking earlier, and that was really what it was. High Alpha has a huge presence here in Indy. They run like some amazing event series, and there's a lot of just really smart people who work for the firm and have worked for the firm over the years. And just being proactive and like getting my butt to some of those events, shaking hands, introducing myself, that was definitely one of the key ingredients. Another thing, and not to sound like braggadocious, but just like doing a good job at the job that you're at, create a good reputation for you within a specific geo or even at large, depending on what your own kind of personal branding strategy is. But I think that was really important too. Just like working really hard and trying to do the best job that I could in the current seat. I think a lot of times people get so focused on like, what's the next thing? What's the next rung in the ladder that I want to get to? And the best way to get to that next ladder is just to crush the thing that you're doing currently. So staying present in that moment and that role, I think is really important. And then the last thing I would say is, I made a deal with myself when I graduated from college that throughout my 20s, the only thing I was going to optimize for was working with like really smart, really good people. So I said no to more money at various times. I said no to jobs at cushier companies with better brands, because the only thing I was optimizing for was making sure that like even such that like my direct manager was the most impressive person I could work for. So my first boss out of school was the CEO of Demand Jump, who has had like, don't quote me on the exact number, but like 8 successful exits.
Whoa.
I mean, he's
Wow.
now the CEO of Elevate Ventures. He's like just an entrepreneurial beast. So just think of like what that type of person can do to someone early in their career. And then I reported to multiple chief revenue officers at Demand Jump as like a 24-year-old. Like I'm so far away from the level that some of these people are on, and you can't help but just absorb all of that. So you roll those things together, and the job comes up at High Alpha, and I've done the networking so that they know about me. I've done as good of a job as I can in my current role so that I've got some experience and some results to fall back on. And I've got kind of this tribe of mentors around me that can help navigate me kind of into that role and set me up to do as good as I possibly can.
That's awesome.
How did you find your why to get you to that place where you're like, you know what, if somebody comes by and says, I'll give you $500K to just leave, how did you like get that, get that why to be like, you know what, I'm just going to stick to this path and I got to optimize for this?
Yeah, I think it's because for me, it's all a future value calculation. So I'm money motivated the same way probably everybody listening to this podcast is money motivated. But like, $10,000, $20,000, even $100,000 as a 24-year-old, like that feels like so much money. But if I want to get to where I want to be when I'm 35 or 40 or 45, that's not a lot of money to me. So that's what it came down to, was staying focused on the 15-year plan, the 20-year plan, being strategic about what needed to happen to put myself in the best position to get there, as opposed to, my first job, I was making nothing. 30K or something when I started at Demand Jump. And I had friends who graduated from Butler who were making 4 or 5 times that. And, you do kind of, there's the competitive nature in you kind of sparks up. Everybody's playing that comparison game a little bit. So it was hard to do it, Chase. It's a good question. But I think just like staying locked in on where do I want to be in 20 years, trying to have that sort of time horizon on my career and what I ultimately want to accomplish.
And one thing I'll also share with our audience is Egan is you're not a marathoner, you're like an ultra. Are you an ultra marathoner? Is that, you do ultras?
I do it all, Chase. But yeah, ultra marathons are my favorite. So let's see, in April, I just ran a 100K race, which is about 62 miles. And that is a good comparison to the way that I think about my career too. It's you can't run 62 miles and be focused only on like the next mile and the next mile and the next mile. You've got to kind of see, you've got to plan for the finish. You've got to conserve energy. You've got to consume the right foods and the right fluids, and you've got to be in the right mindset to ultimately get to the end of that race. So there's really a lot of metaphors and analogs between like that style of running and a career in early stage software.
Okay, tell me if this sounds like you. You're a sales hunter with literally hundreds of target accounts in your territory and no idea who in your patch is even in the market for your solution. You've pulled all the reports, built all the lists, and you've done a bunch of account research, but you're still in the dark about where to find your low-hanging fruit. And look, you could waste another quarter smiling and dialing, grinding through a cold list, and blasting out emails, or you could do what I do and get Leadfeeder. Leadfeeder identifies the companies that visit your company's website and tracks on-site activity so you can see which leads from your region are ready to buy right now. Leadfeeder has customizable notifications, lead scoring, routing, and it works seamlessly with your CRM system. Right now, Sales Players has got the hookup on an extended 21-day free trial offer, so be sure to use the link in the show notes to sign up. Oh, and you should probably forward that link over to your ops team so they can get Leadfeeder set up for your whole team. Stop burning time and resources on leads that don't convert and sign up for Leadfeeder. I want to bring this back to the sales side of things. I know you're not necessarily a salesperson by background. It sounds like the roles you had early on were more focused on like marketing, rev ops, demand, and those sorts of things. But here's what I think an interesting way we can go with this, because a lot of our listeners are either founders themselves, working on founder-led sales. They're trying to get to their first million plus in ARR, escape velocity. But then probably the vast majority of our listeners work in the venture-backed tech company space, right? So, and many of those people don't have a direct connection or a direct line into like how decisions get made or how targets get set within a venture-backed startup. So I would love your perspective to share with our listeners. What is it that, goes into when you're launching a company, and it sounds like you've launched dozens of them at this point. What goes into like setting up those targets, and how do you think about going to market quickly and getting those early wins? Give us kind of the behind the scenes look at, from that high alpha, and then in your current role at Backstroke, like what's the standpoint? How do you launch something and expect it to get to $1 million in revenue, and how do you think about that scale?
Yeah.
Big question.
So on the target setting, on the target setting front, I think a lot of people get this wrong. So targets should be extremely deliberate. They should be strategic. They should be focused on getting to a specific point of revenue or some type of metric that signifies traction, because that's really what investors are looking for. Is there traction? Is there product market fit? Will people buy this? Can we get to that metric at a certain time for a certain reason? So, for example, if you're venture backed and you are, you're kind of going for it all, $1 billion outcome, $1 billion plus outcome, then a lot of the goal setting is oriented around fundraising rounds. And each fundraising round has sort of baseline targets for ARR, annual recurring revenue, retention or churn numbers, et cetera. So you're kind of working backwards from, all right, if I'm going to run out of cash in 18 months and I need to be at, $2 million in ARR to raise Series A, then what are all the steps that need to happen in order to get there? I think a mistake that a lot of very early stage companies make is they don't set targets soon enough. So at Backstroke, one of the things we all agreed on was we're going to set sales targets from day zero, literally. And we're going to orient them around a monthly cadence, not a quarterly cadence, because things are changing so fast in a startup that you need that like kind of feedback cycle to be quick, so that if you don't hit, you can make the change within 30 days or try something new within 30 days rather than like wait till the end of the quarter. And if you don't set any goals at all, like what are you measuring? I mean, maybe you could say that you're building a product or you're, building a, brand marketing stuff or whatever, but it doesn't matter if you're not making money. Right. Exactly.
That money word, you got to actually be bringing in money and paid users. Isn't that right? Is that what we're trying to do here?
It is. I mean, this is a business after all. Despite that, a lot of SaaS companies lose money forever. Some of that is changing. I think in the current climate, there's definitely a bigger push towards profitability and companies breaking even and all that kind of stuff. In fact, at present, that's Backstroke's goal. So our targets are all set to break even before we run out of cash. And if we hit our plan, which so far we are, then we're going to have a lot of optionality when it gets to that point, versus like we ran out of money and if we don't get someone to fund us, we're going to go out of business.
Yeah, we had Ross Rich from Accord on here, and he's the founder of Accord, and he's going after the same way, and he was actually able to get a Series A round because of that in this environment recently.
Yeah, an observation I've made across my career, because I've worked for a mix of like Silicon Valley, coastal city, I won't even call it Silicon Valley, coastal city companies, but I have a couple of companies I was at that were based in Indianapolis, other states that were somewhere in the middle of America. And it's funny because I think the flyover, whatever Chase called it, the flyover startup states tend to think more about the money and they tend to try to run their startup a little bit more like a traditional business where the whole goal is to make a profit or, at least break even, right? But the coastal ones have this mindset of like the innovation curve and money is almost secondary. I know that's changing in the current climate, but historically, in my career, I would hear founders say, profitability is not as important as just being the first to market or the fastest or growing the biggest user base, even if they don't pay us. And I'm here for the profit-focused companies if possible, right? And I know it's hard to get to that profitability if you're trying to grow and you're trying to be the first in the market or the category leader. I get it. But I love that you're already running the business with the mindset of like getting to that break-even point as quickly as possible and not just thinking, we're going to run this thing for 20 years, losing money, but growing somehow, growing the product or whatever. Doesn't matter if we're profitable. All that matters is that we get bought by someone someday. So I think it's a super cool thing. Definitely an observation I've made. So with that, what are some things that you're doing in Backstroke to make sure that goal gets hit by your team? And do you have sellers in the seat today, or are you doing all the sales at this point?
Our CEO, named RJ Collier, he is kind of the ultimate sales leader person, kind of carries the quota, so to speak. I'm heavily involved in that process to the point where, I am doing some selling and kind of helping RJ along with that process. But, a couple things come to mind. One, founder-led sales is, and I learned this at High Alpha, and I literally saw it 40 times. Like, I do not think you can be successful. And I don't believe in a lot of black and white, kind of truisms in what we do, but this is one of them. Like, you cannot be successful if the founder doesn't sell the first $500,000 to $1 million in ARR. There's just something about the act of the person who's responsible for building the product, setting up the go-to-market, raising money. There's got to be like that central hub between all of the spokes in the organization that they have to be doing the selling. And so that is what we're leaning into at Backstroke. We don't have any reps on the team yet. We will when we hit a certain ARR milestone or kind of feel like we've gotten to that product market fit and we're ready to scale. But right now it's all founder-led sales. So one of the reasons that's important too is when a customer buys an early stage product, let's call it pre-series A, maybe even pre-series B to some extent, like, they are investing in the product to be sure and the outcomes that product is going to create, but they're also investing in the founding team, because all early products have some deficiencies relative to the ultimate vision. The enterprise grade, fully suited, like ready to go product. You're always going to be, a few quarters, maybe even a few years away from that, depending on what you're building. So the fact that the customer is like actually buying access to the founder, buying into their vision is really important. And it's hard to outsource that to someone else, even an FTE. Yeah. So the founder-led sales is super important. The other thing, just around like, our biggest battle as a new company is trust and credibility, which is something that I think a lot of sellers and marketers battle across the board. But it's especially acute in that early stage when you're trying to build that roster of logos and case studies and things like that. So
yeah,
it's very important to us to actually get out in market, like boots on the ground, hitting the dirt, meeting people in person, shaking their hands, giving them hugs, like, because if they can see us and talk to us and kind of know more deeply on a more personal level who we are, we know that there's a better chance that they'll trust us and ultimately buy from us. So we just literally yesterday wrapped up a 4-city tour, launching a new product, and it doesn't, I think one mistake that people can make is trying to bite off like too much of the apple too early. It's so much better to do something that's to the scale that you can do a really, really good job, rather than like spread yourself too thinly across a bunch of initiatives or an event that's like too big that you can't pull off. So, each of these little field events that we ran were like 8 or 10 prospects in the room at one time, which we knew we could fill the tables. You know, we knew that we could have enough people from Backstroke there to kind of work the room. We knew that we could make it a good experience within our budget. And, you know, we said, how many can we do? We can do 4. Like, we can't do 10. We can't do 15. We can't do 20. Let's do 4. Let's pick the cities because we have strong networks there, because there are a lot of our customers there that are in our ICP. So yeah, it's been a lot of that, a lot of hand-to-hand combat, a lot of working like in the actual territory, and a lot of trying to do as much stuff in person as we possibly can.
And Egan, from your experience with High Alpha and those 40 companies, like, are those in-person events, like, how important do you feel like those in-person events were for the other companies to get those early sales?
I think it's the single most important, like, what's called a demand gen strategy that an early stage company can do. Like, if you said, Egan, you can pick one thing, and that's only thing that you can do for 2 years, it's small, you know, highly curated in-person field events. So I think it's critically important, but not everybody does it because it's hard, and you got to get your ass on a plane and, you know, sit in the airport for 4 hours. And events are scary. Like, what if nobody shows up? What if the Wi-Fi goes out? What if the monitor doesn't work? What if lunch doesn't show up? Like, there's so many things that can go wrong, and it's easy to talk yourself out of it. But it is, I would say, by far the most effective thing that I've seen across that whole, you know, 40 company like sample.
And can you just give us sort of okay, you had the event, like, what is the follow-up after the event? So what does that look like for your team?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff that probably won't blow your mind. Like, we add them to the email list. We run a newsletter. So right?
Revolutionary.
So they're going to hear from us 2 times a week. We try to do a really good job with those newsletters, and that's, again, to the, like, bite off what you can actually handle. We think we can do 2 newsletters per week that are, like, awesome. And I'm really proud every time they go out, and our email metrics are really, really good. You show up to our event, you're now going to hear from us twice a week. Anyone who's a really tight ICP fit match, which that's another thing, like blocking and tackling stuff that people don't do, you know, rigorously enough, is just define that super tight ICP. Know who the companies are that will buy from you at that stage. If they're a really tight match, we'll reach out to them personally. We've got a, you know, right behind me in the cabinets, we've got like 100 Backstroke hoodies. We'll send those out. So just little things to just stay in touch, make sure they know that you appreciated that they were there, you know, make sure that you're kind of skimming the low hanging fruit, and then just like always try and always be present. What I always try and remind my teams of is, like, nobody is paying as much attention to us as we think they are.
Yeah.
Like, we're just a little blip on their radar, and if we're only going to email them one time after an event, they're going to forget about us in like 36 hours. So how do we always have, what's the next thing that we're launching? What's the next campaign that we're running? What's the next reason to reach out? What's the next thing that we can send them that's actually valuable and that they would actually be happy and excited to get? But you know, we endeavor to make sure that nobody forgets about us once they meet us.
What are your deal cycles like? Are they pretty quick, or are you more of an enterprise play where it's lots of stakeholders, lots of moving parts?
Yeah, right now we're playing, I'd say, squarely in the mid-market. Our ACV is anywhere from like 18 to 45K. And we're very pilot driven, very POC driven, which I would recommend to any AI company right now, because people, you know, it comes back to trust, credibility. Like, nobody's going to believe what you're saying to them until you prove it. And, but I think for that reason, people are willing to move pretty quickly. So I would say from first touch to like proof of concept, it's probably 45 days. And the POCs are all 30 days, and our conversion rate on them is really high. So I'd say deal cycle is anywhere in the like call it 50 to 75 day range.
So you probably have some like upside growth then if you're doing POCs. And is it a seat-based pricing or is it usage-based? How's the model?
Yeah, we affectionately refer to it as t-shirt pricing. So it's just small, medium, large. And again, that's
cool.
like it's a good, again, I don't believe in the black and whiteness of anything in what we do. I've seen enough companies to know that there's a lot of right answers to a lot of these questions, but simple pricing for a startup is critical. Like we thought about going usage based. We thought about going, the amount of emails generated. There are some kind of obvious levers that we could pull, but we don't know how customers are going to use our product. We don't know how much they're going to use it. We don't know what great versus okay versus, bad looks like. So keep it simple to start, make it easy to understand, make it easy for people to buy from you. So that's it, Jesse. Just small, medium, large right now.
In Egan,
really
I mean, that's pretty awesome. And I think that is something that I've seen like just shifted a lot in my SaaS career is the pricing models of like usage based or all in, it's like, especially for ICs to just understand like, how do we sell this thing? It's like, it just needs to be simple,
Yep.
Simple.
Absolutely. Even if you have complicated pricing, which some companies necessarily do, I would argue like most companies can figure out a simple pricing solution, but there's edge cases for sure. If you have complicated pricing, then it's your job to make that as simple as possible when you present it to the customer. Like they don't need to see all of the back end messiness. Like it needs to be defensible. You need to know how to explain it, but like you shouldn't be pulling up a spreadsheet with 40 different columns and rows and calculations about why it costs X amount of money. Like just make it easy to understand.
Yeah. Egan, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone out there who's listening right now who is about ready to launch their own company for the first time? Number one piece of advice you'd give for someone in their first 6 months?
Man, that's a good one. I think it's, can I give two?
Yeah, we'll do two.
So the first one is make sure you're doing it with people that you really, really like. And I don't recommend doing it alone for most people. So, there's so many kind of metaphors, jokes, et cetera, about you're married to your co-founders or, they're your family or like, it's true. You spend so much time with these people. You're traveling with them. You're up late with them. You're up early. You're always on so make sure that you really, really like them and have a good relationship. I've seen some co-founder relationships go south and it's really, really messy. And in a lot of times it just cripples the business. So, that's one. And my second one is be ready to sell.
Hell yeah.
Founders who aren't willing, ready, passionate, excited to get in front of customers and sell something are severely disadvantaged to those founders who are willing to do that. So, show up with your sales face on and be ready to go.
Well, Egan, talk to us about Backstroke and how people can who is your ideal client? Like, who are you looking to meet and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chase. So, Backstroke is a generative email platform for mostly e-commerce, mid-market e-commerce brands. So if you're on Shopify, Klaviyo, and you have a marketing program, there's a good chance that we can help you. We always say that everybody knows a marketer. So there may or may not be a lot of Shopify, Klaviyo people listening to this podcast, but I bet you know one. So so feel free to kick those over to me. Best place to stay in touch with me is on LinkedIn. I post pretty much every day, usually talking about sales, marketing, entrepreneurship, the founding journey, and sharing, about our journey at Backstroke as well. So, find me there, and appreciate it.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation. I am definitely going to soundbite Egan the part where you said that the founder has to sell the first million. I just think the whole world needs to hear that, and it's such an important thing, man. But thanks for coming on and sharing with us your growth strategy and insights from your very interesting career.
And I'm going to be in Indianapolis this weekend. So if you're at the Penrod, I'll be selling pottery with my wife. So come on down.
Let's hang out. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Egan.
Yeah.